Okay, hello everybody, welcome. We're here on CM42 TV. It's time for another movie vlog today. I say movie vlog, it's just going to be this. It's just going to be me talking. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favourite movies of all time. Yes, it's going to be this one right here. Back to the Future, ladies and gents. Now, it's funny. In these videos where I do movie chat or whatever, I talk about any films that, you know, I've been watching recently or new Blu-rays that I have in my collection, that sort of thing. For some reason, the thought of seeing classic films in the cinema always kind of comes up. Like I'd say, oh, I'd want to see this film in the cinema or this film in the cinema again, reliving that experience, you know. And I said the number one film that I wanted to see in the cinema was Jaws, 1975, Steven Spielberg, one of my favourite movies of all time. I've said publicly and privately that Jaws is my favourite movie ever. It's up there, it's in my top three, you know, at all times, you know, it just depends on what mood I'm in or whatever, you know. So I always said Jaws was my favourite one, or the number one choice I would have in terms of going to see a film like that in the cinema. And last summer, I was able to do that. I made a video about it here on CM42 TV. I remember it was the warmest day of the year. It was a Saturday, summer's day. It was about 33 degrees in Glasgow. And everybody was having barbecues and everybody was having water fights and sitting out their back garden reading books and all that stuff. Me and my father, we went to the cinema, a warm, sticky cinema in Glasgow with loads of other people who wanted to see a 1975 classic film in the cinema, and we saw Jaws on the big screen, and it was an amazing experience. And I talked about that experience here last summer, and then I said, okay, well, I've crossed that one off the cinema going movie bucket list, you know, for seeing something in the cinema. What's the other one? What's the next film I'd want to see in the cinema? And I said, it's going to be Back to the Future. It has to be. It has to be Back to the Future. And I don't know what it is. I must just have this thing where if I say it publicly, it's going to happen. So I did a kind of, not a Q&A sort of thing, but I did a video with Razor Wire Reviews, my good close personal friend Luke, who we did a video recently called Can Films Save My Life? And I said on that video that the next film, the next classic film that I want to see in the cinema is Back to the Future. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, the option was there. And I knew that was going to happen because, you know, Cineworld, my local cinema, and lots of other cinemas actually are promoting, you know, you can go see classic films in the cinema to try and get people back to the movies, you know, to try and get people to go back in time to see them. No, to go back to the cinema to see these classic films, you know, and they're putting on loads of classics. They did the whole Lord of the Rings marathon, which I really considered going to. But just with COVID kicking about and that sort of thing, I wasn't too keen on going 3 days in a row, and the films are so long, and I didn't think it was the right time. What I definitely thought would be a right time would be going to see Back to the Future, because it was at the top of my list now, you know. And now that I've seen it in the cinema, I don't know what one's now at the top of my list, you know. Is it just Star Wars, you know? But that's a bit boring. Everybody's Star Wars, you know. I don't know what it would be. I guess it would just be maybe reliving an experience like a Hateful Eight or a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or something like that, you know. There's nothing kind of better than seeing a film you have no idea about and then it ends up being great. But there's also something good about seeing a classic film you've always loved, you know. Bohemian Rhapsody would be a good one as well. I remember that one really sticking in my mind as like a great cinema experience film. Films in terms of, you know, this year, 2020, 1917 stands out as an excellent cinema experience. Parasite as well, you know, it's not this big epic film, but there was something about seeing that film just sort of progress and escalate as dramatically as it does, and on the big screen was really good. So there's been a lot of big ones. Tenet was a good one to see in the big screen. It's such an epic film, however it's so unnecessarily confusing. I'm definitely not going to be watching that one anytime soon. I saw it in the cinema twice to try and make sense of it, and when I say make sense of it, I understand the story and understand what they were going to do, but I just trying to piece, if you've seen the film you know what I mean, try and piece it together and why we have two separate side plots that have nothing really to do with the main story, but we're going to put it in there anyway to make it more confusing, even though the main plot is really confusing. I don't know, don't ask me, ask Christopher Nolan. They'd be good ones to see in the cinema, the Nolan Batman films again. They'd be good ones. Even the Burton Batman films are really good too. Anyway, I don't know what's on my list of cinema dream films now, but Back to the Future was up there and I was able to cross off the bucket list and I was very happy to do so. There's nothing really, you know, to say about this film that hasn't been said already. It's definitely one of my favourite films of all time, but what I can say now is, after seeing it on the big screen, and because then I kind of went into this sort of phase last week when I saw the film, of just like a sort of Back to the Future kick, where I ended up watching Back to the Future Part 2. I have these all on Steelbook, by the way, I got for Christmas one year, so that's Back to the Future Part 2, and of course Back to the Future Part 3 all on beautiful Blu-ray Steelbook. And I'd never seen the third one. I'd never seen the third one before, even though I had it in my collection. But you can't have, you know, the first two without having the third one. You can't have it without completing the set, can you? So in terms of watching these sequels, they were great. The second one I'd only seen bits of and maybe seen it a long time ago. I ended up loving the second one like a great deal, and I was like, it's so much better than people say it is, and it's so much better than I had in my mind. The third one I wasn't too sold on. I enjoyed the third one. There was something about Doc having a romance that just didn't really sit with me, and that's not because I don't like the Doc character. I love the Doc character, but it just didn't. There was something different. I guess that's what they were going for. They wanted to change it up and they wanted to have development and that sort of thing. But I do love that technically the story runs throughout the three films. You know, it's not just, I mean, you can watch the first film start to finish and enjoy the story for what it is, but then you know, you could watch the trilogy start to finish and still enjoy that same story, because although the second one builds on the first one and the third one does feel like a bit of an extension or a bit of an add-on, the first two really go together really, really well. It is this one continuous story, really. But the beauty of the first one is that it's so it's so well, obviously it's so well thought. It was a film and it's a time travel film, but it's so expertly executed to the point where every scene is important, and that happens in films sometimes. And you know, I'm kind of so used to watching films now where you see a film and you just wait for the next big thing to happen, the next big scene to happen. You can sometimes forget about these wee intricate scenes in between, and that's why I say it's very important to rewatch films, because on second and third viewing of films, that's when you notice the smaller scenes. That's when you notice the more independent and more intimate scenes is what I was looking for there. The ones that you don't really think are progressing the story, but the details and the dialogue are really fuller than the characters and the story itself. And Back to the Future is a huge, you know, component of that sort of style, you know. I've always known Back to the Future to be one of my favourite films. I studied Back to the Future when I was in high school. We were doing film studies, whatever, in English, and my teacher showed the scene. I had never seen the film before. We were showing the scene of the chase scene back in 1955, where Marty steals the kind of crate from the little girl and turns it into a skateboard and holds her at the back of the car and stuff, and Biff and all of his pals go into the cow dung and all that stuff. And I love how they redone it in the second film, but it's like with the hoverboard instead. That was really nice. I thought that was a nice wee clever thing. I love how Biff is also in the third film, but it's like a long ancestor. It's so clearly Biff, you know, but he's still doing these sort of Biff antics, you know. But anyway, so that we were studying that film, specifically that scene, and I remember watching that scene a good 15 times or something within a couple of months, studying Back to the Future to write about it in an essay in school. And we also studied the opening scene where you know, it shows the clocks and stuff, and it's so funny, it's such a small scene, but even just in that one portion, and of course I hadn't seen Back to the Future in a while, maybe a year or so. So watching it in the cinema this time round, I kind of knew what to expect, obviously, and I was waiting for certain moments. And it was so funny, I was kind of waiting for the opening scene right before Power of Love kicks in, because I know that, you know, they're showing the clocks and stuff, and all I had in my head was, oh, they're just showing the clocks because it's about time. But we, you know, each individual clock kind of has its own wee thing. You know, there's even one where Doc is kind of hanging from one of the clock legs, you know, because that's foreshadowing what happens later on in the film. And just the time on the clocks and stuff like that, they're all a bit late or early or whatever it is, making them late for school. It's such an important moment, you know, and just everything about the film and everything about these small scenes really add up to later on, you know, which I loved, and it really stood out more in the cinema, I thought, when I was watching them. So I really enjoyed watching it in the cinema, not just because it was Back to the Future, but because I noticed these films, even in Back to the Future, a film I've seen so many times, you know, you were still noticing these wee things and these wee extra Easter eggs and trivia points and Q&A moments that you could find, fun facts in the film. So yeah, if you see, you know, a favourite film advertised in the cinema, even if you've seen it a million times, like I'd done with Jaws or like I'd done with Back to the Future, I can't recommend it enough. It's not going to change the film, it's maybe make you appreciate a film even more, but it's going to add to your experience, it's going to add to your relationship with the film. There's been times where classic films have been in the cinema that I'd not seen before. I'm thinking of 2001: A Space Odyssey, I'm thinking about A Clockwork Orange, I'm thinking about Escape from New York. These are three films, I'm sure there's more. There are three films that stick out in my mind that I hadn't seen before, and I knew that I wanted to watch one day. And the opportunity came up to see it in the cinema, and I thought, if I'm ever going to see a film, I want to see it in that setting. And I loved all three of those films. And I don't know if I was to go back and watch any of those films. I kind of went back and watched 2001, but that one's such a mind-boggling film anyway. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around that film regardless, even in the cinema. But watching those other films there and any other ones I've seen classic wise, it just adds to your love and your appreciation to the film because you see it in its most purest form. The way it was made for the surround sound, the big screen, you know, the atmosphere with the other people, you know. And even because of the restrictions and that sort of thing, not being able to have a full cinema, there was still a really good atmosphere for Back to the Future at the cinema. I loved seeing Back to the Future in the cinema. I loved hearing the songs, Power of Love and Back in Time. My God, what a great song. I knew it was a great song. Of course you do. You watch these films and listen to the song all the time. But in the cinema it makes such a difference, you know. Hearing that surround sound and hearing those films. And it's so funny, all these times I've watched the film, I'd never known it was Huey Lewis that stands up and says, "You're just too darn loud." I just always thought it was some guy. And it's not, it's Huey Lewis from Huey Lewis and the News. Everybody knows that, you know. But I didn't know that until I watched it. I went, hang on a second, then I realised that I did know that. I'd read it somewhere. But it took that cinema experience for it to click. I think that's really important. So there's these wee moments that you think you know, and then boom, you know. Only thing about Back to the Future that always kind of confused me is when at the end of the film, when Marty, real time Marty, goes back in time again after past Marty has come back to the future to warn Doc, right? So real time Marty goes back in, and I was thinking surely the whole thing just happens all over again then. Surely he's not going to know about all that stuff. But then of course Doc is wearing the bulletproof vest, he's sewn together and sellotaped together the letter. I'm sure they packed extra plutonium, you know what I mean, to take back in time with them again. So yeah, great film. So many good theories you can come up with Back to the Future, and it has gone up on my list of favourite films now. It was sitting around number 8 for the longest time, my top 10 list. It's now up at number 6 or number 5, I think, in terms of my favourite movies ever. So that's a big thing, and it's because of the cinema experience. It's because of, you know, that kind of kick I was on for about a week where I watched all 3 and I watched interviews and stuff like that with Crispin Glover, who had this big, I didn't know he had so much beef with Robert Zemeckis and that sort of thing, and the other producer, which I can't remember his name, but and I knew that he got recast and stuff like that, but I didn't know it was such a big falling out because Crispin Glover's such an amazing character and such an amazing performance in Back to the Future. He's someone that I've studied before in terms of that sort of performance as sort of a young actor or whatever, you know. So he's always good. Seeing the scenes with all the wee comments, you know, with his mum and with Jennifer at the start and things like that, and even when the teacher. But even that, when he's shouting in Marty's face and he's like, there's never been a McFly in this school ever in time that has ever been successful or done well in school. No McFly in history. And then Marty just simply goes, well, history's about to change. And it's such an in-your-face obvious moment and such an obvious reference to the fact we're going back in time to change history. Or to fix history, I should say. But I'd never noticed it before. It's just a line in a scene, and now you watch it and you go, oh, every line in every scene is so important. You know, and it's so funny how it takes you so many times. It takes me, at least I'm probably 3 steps behind everybody else, but it took me so long to realise that each individual line is important. It's brilliant. It's such a great film. It's a masterpiece. It's genius. It's a 10 out of 10 if there ever was one. And if you've never seen Back to the Future, what are you doing with your life? Thanks for watching this video, everybody. Let me know in the comments what you think of Back to the Future and any other classic films I should check out and do a wee sort of vlog style review, I guess, of here on CM42 TV. So thanks so much. Take care of yourselves. Follow me on social media. Twitter and Instagram is at CM42 TV. And it's time to go back in time. Gotta get back in time.